Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. How angry is Biden with Netanyahu? How frustrated is he really? Well, a new book reportedly reveals that the American president unleashed a profanity-laden rant. We tell you all about this and much more, and we decode what this really means. That's coming up as a part of our top story in just a bit. Here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. Is the Ukrainian president losing friends as the country crumbles in the face of Russian advances? The Ukraine November Peace Summit is no longer taking place. And we tell you what that means for Volodymyr Zelensky. What is behind Sri Lanka's move to permit a Chinese ship to dock? What's the story? And what does this mean for India? We tell you all that you need to know. Can asteroids be used to supply food to astronauts? We tell you what a new study says. All this and more coming up. Our top story is about the American president, Joe Biden. He views the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, as a quote-unquote bad guy. We are not the ones saying that. A new book written by American journalist Bob Woodward reportedly reveals how Biden personally views the Israeli Prime Minister and reveals more, that Biden is frustrated with Netanyahu over Israel's war conduct is an open secret, but the fact that the American president detests the Israeli Prime Minister with such passion is definitely news. Even though the US publicly stands by Israel in its war against the Iranian proxies in West Asia, the deepening rift between Biden and Bibi now stands completely exposed. The question is, what does that mean for the war in Gaza? What does this mean for the future of Gaza? Has Biden lost his grip on Israel? Now, here's what we know. The American president's frustration with the Israeli Prime Minister reportedly reached a breaking point this spring. This was reportedly over Netanyahu's conduct in the war between Israel and Hamas. Woodward's book, which is officially out next week, reportedly says that Biden unleashed a profanity-laden rant over Netanyahu when the IDF entered Rafah in May this year. Biden reportedly called Netanyahu a liar, a bad guy, quote unquote, saying that the Israeli leader had no strategy. In fact, Woodward claims in his book that Biden said he felt Netanyahu had lied to him regularly. He says that Biden even threatened to withhold American weapons after Netanyahu became increasingly threatening over Hamas. In one of the most dramatic parts of the book, Woodward talks about Biden's struggles with Netanyahu amid the war. It seems that behind closed doors, Biden has expressed deep frustration with the Israeli Prime Minister's handling of the war. Now, this is significant You see, Biden has publicly voiced support for Israel, even if it meant facing international criticism over Israeli actions in Gaza. Israel, remember, is facing international censure for continuing to bombard the Gaza Strip and killing over 41,000 Palestinians in the process. And as a result, analysts, academicians, media have also slammed Washington for supporting Israel. According to Woodward's book, Biden did not keep his frustrations with Netanyahu to himself. Some of the scolding reportedly happened man to man. In April, Biden reportedly slammed Netanyahu over a phone call, telling him, quote, "You've got no strategy." And as the war in West Asia escalated, Biden's anger only mounted. In the month of July, after one strike on Hezbollah leaders in Lebanon, according to the book, Biden used an expletive to refer to Bibi's actions. Not just that. Biden reportedly told the Israeli Prime Minister, and I'm quoting here, "You know, the perception of Israel around the world increasingly is that you are a rogue state, a rogue actor," quote unquote. Now, the choice of words for the leader of Israel, who happens to be a key ally of the United States, are among the other shocking details that are emerging as per reports from the Pulitzer Prize winners' books. But one thing here is for sure, the tension between Biden and Netanyahu extended to other regional issues, including Israel's strikes against Iranian targets, and we don't need an insider account to confirm that. Over the course of the conflict in West Asia, we have seen how Netanyahu has time and again ignored American instructions. In April as well, Biden urged Netanyahu to do nothing in response to Iran's missile attacks, but that's advice that the Israeli leader had ultimately ignored. It's a pattern we would see play out through the course of the Gaza war. And it was very evident that Biden had lost the grip over its biggest ally in West Asia. And it was clear that Israel under Netanyahu was only interested in American aid and not its opinion in war. The White House has so far declined to confirm whether Biden's comments in the book were accurate, particularly as they related to Netanyahu. But senior Deputy White House Press Secretary Emily Simons told reporters the Biden administration was not going to comment on every anecdote that poured out of books or other reporting. In fact, White House defended Biden's relationship with Israel. Simons said, and I'm quoting here, "The commitment that we have with Israel is ironclad. The relationship between Netanyahu and the president goes back decades. They can have very honest and straightforward conversations with each other," quote unquote. Since Hamas staged an attack on Israel on the 7th of October 2023, triggering a war with Israel, thousands of civilians have died in Gaza. In 1 year, Gaza has been reduced to rubble, with Israel now fighting war on all its fronts. And what's more, a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran also looms large. And Washington worries the Israelis will bomb Iran's nuclear sites. But can they? Will Israel bomb Iran's nuclear facilities? For 22 years, Israeli forces have planned for this moment for them. If they want to attack, the time seems to be ripe. Israel is, after all, preparing for the next round of retaliation for Iran's massive missile strike last week. But just because Israel can does not mean Israel should or that it will. While President Biden has warned Israel against striking nuclear or energy sites, saying that any response should be proportionate to last week's Iranian attack. So while the US has acknowledged that some counterstrike is appropriate, Washington wants to basically avoid any Israeli action that could plunge the region into a full-scale war. Will Netanyahu listen is the question. Ukraine seems to be hurtling towards a free fall. Its hopes of turning the tide against Russia seem to be in jeopardy. The long talked about November peace summit is no longer happening. Let that sink in. This is a huge jolt for the Ukrainian president. It comes as the US is yet to make up its mind about letting Kiev use long-range weapons inside Russia. Just to put it simply, things are not looking good for Volodymyr Zelensky. Ukraine's allies have made comments expressing reservations and concerns about the ongoing war. And to top that, Zelensky has had to cancel the November peace summit. As per reports, Daria Zarivna, senior presidential aide to the Ukrainian president Volodymyr Zelensky, told the media on Tuesday that the second peace summit will not take place in November. You see, this is a massive blow for Ukraine. Not just that, as per experts, Ukraine's ambitious Kursk offensive in August was carried out with the aim of using captured Russian territory as a bargaining chip for the November summit. Not only is the summit not taking place, Ukraine's Kursk offensive has largely been viewed by analysts as a failure, with Russia not only managing to withhold Ukraine's offensive, but also managing to regain a significant share of the territory, while simultaneously capturing large parts of Ukrainian territory in the east that many experts are viewing to be on the cusp of crumbling to Russian advances. In fact, the Russian Defense Ministry on Tuesday claimed its forces have captured Ukrainian villages of Zolota Neva and Zoryane Pershe in Donetsk region, putting further pressure on the Ukrainian army. The villages reportedly lie to the north and to the south of the town of Korakhove. As per reports, one of the focal points of military activity on the Eastern Front. And on the other hand, Zelensky said that Ukraine is maintaining pressure against Russian troops in the Kursk region. Listen in.
The fighting in the Kursk region is now in its third month already, and we are maintaining the necessary pressure on Russia in this area.
This, by the way, is just one part of the story. Like we said, the US is yet to make up its mind on allowing Kiev to use long-range weapons. On Saturday, the White House has reportedly announced that Biden would not be meeting Zelensky in Germany. That's also happened. As per reports, Zelensky was set to bring up that issue, and Biden reportedly has cancelled all of his travel plans due to the impact of Hurricane Milton in Florida. And it is not clear when the two leaders will be meeting next. And this is crucial, because several leaders have voiced concerns and reservation about Ukraine in regard to the war against Russia. As recently as Tuesday, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban at a news conference in France reportedly said that Ukraine cannot win the war with Russia on the battlefield. His comment comes days after the Serbian president Alexander Vučić reportedly in an interview said that the Ukraine conflict is slipping away from US control and could now come back to them like a boomerang. Serbia, although not a member of NATO, has expressed support for Ukraine in the ongoing war with Russia. In the past, even the United Nations 2 weeks ago said that it cannot afford to support Ukraine for the upcoming winter. In fact, even citizens in European countries are putting pressure domestically on their leaders to stop supporting Ukraine. Just last week, thousands of people took to the streets of Berlin to protest against arms deliveries to Ukraine, expressing concern about a possible nuclear escalation. Germany, as per reports, is one of the biggest donors to Ukraine, sending tanks, air defense, artillery systems, as well as other weapons to Kiev. Even in France, there were similar such protests in Paris by citizens. Earlier this year, over French President Emmanuel Macron's proposal to send troops to Ukraine. And now, with the peace summit not taking place in November, it is becoming increasingly clear that the time for Ukraine is running out. And the weeks and months ahead look extremely challenging for Volodymyr Zelensky. And our next story is about how Malaysia is challenging an aggressive China. You heard that right. Malaysia has reportedly started shadowing Chinese ships that are operating within its territorial waters as China continues to limit oil and gas exploration in the South China Sea. And this is how Malaysia is defending its right. A Chinese so-called research vessel that was accused of conducting unauthorized surveys was closely monitored by Malaysia. The name of the Chinese ship is Ke Shui San Hao. This Chinese spy ship, as we like to call it, was conducting its unauthorized survey at a place called the Ardasir Bank. It lies 150 nautical miles, that is 278 kilometers from Kota Kinabalu in East Malaysia. That is where the Chinese spy ship was spotted and closely monitored by Malaysian patrol ship called the KD Sondang. And this is Malaysia asserting its maritime rights amid China's bid to obstruct oil exploration efforts. And this is not the first time Malaysia has stood firm against China's maritime claims. You see, diplomatic tensions between the two flared up previously, particularly during an incident in the year 2020. Beijing had issued stern warnings to halt energy exploration of Sarawak, the Malaysian state located in Borneo Island. And then China's Haiyang Dizzy 8 had entered Malaysian waters and followed a vessel carrying out exploration activities. Beijing has regularly issued warnings to Kuala Lumpur to cease energy work off Sarawak. Remember, China does this regularly. It bullies other smaller countries through such pressure tactics. But China's assertiveness in the South China Sea has only increased. And this has resulted in heightened tensions. You must be aware of China's 9-dash line. In defiance of international law, China claims the 9-dash line area, which basically covers most of the South China Sea and overlaps with the exclusive economic zone claims of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan and Vietnam. Beijing's sweeping claims of sovereignty over the South China Sea and its estimated 11 billion barrels of untapped oil and natural gas have antagonized these countries. And what's more, in recent years, satellite imagery has shown China's increased efforts to reclaim land in the South China Sea by physically increasing the island size or by creating new ones altogether. Still, despite these pressures and Chinese maritime forces operating in the area, Malaysia's state oil company has continued its operations. Now, Malaysia is also planning a new naval base at Bintulu in Sarawak. It has been conceptualized for years. Last month, the Malaysian Defence Ministry said that it was in the final stages of negotiating with the Sarawak state government for the construction of the new naval base at Bintulu. Here's what we know about this new base. Once complete, Malaysia's Bintulu base will be designated as the Royal Malaysian Navy's 4th Naval Regional Headquarters, but it remains to be seen how this strategic posture will actually influence Malaysia's relationship with China. Kuala Lumpur has continuously monitored Chinese movements using its Navy, Coast Guard vessels and aircraft. In fact, Malaysia has also done so with the help of drones provided by the United States. Washington also supplies intelligence and conducts surveillance from airfields located in various other ASEAN member states. You see, in recent years, Malaysia has become increasingly assertive in defending its interests, especially as its oil production declines and the need for exploration to open new wells grows. In the month of February, in a diplomatic note sent to the Malaysian embassy in Beijing, China basically demanded that Malaysia immediately cease all activities in a resource-rich maritime area of Sarawak on Borneo Island. This note, which was published by a Philippine newspaper on the 29th of August, reveals how Beijing accused Malaysia of infringing on Chinese territory. Of course, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim rejected China's demands, asserting last week that the country would not halt its oil and gas exploration in the South China Sea. Malaysia maintains that these activities fall within Malaysia's territorial waters. On to the UK now. The British public is turning against Keir Starmer. I know what you're thinking already. Didn't he just enter 10 Downing Street? Well, recent reports suggest that more than 6 in 10 Britons may now dislike the Prime Minister. Right after getting a landslide victory, the UK Prime Minister and his party's popularity have taken a massive hit. After an abysmal performance in the first 100 days of office, some major changes have now been introduced in the party ranks. Recently, in what was touted to be a bold move, the UK Prime Minister also had to let go of his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, post the Freebies Gate controversy that his party found itself dealing with. Remember, the UK Prime Minister himself and senior ministers came under fire. This triggered an overhaul of the operations, leading the UK Prime Minister to appoint his former aide, Morgan McSweeney, who masterminded Labour's win during the July elections. Meanwhile, last week at a Labour Party conference in Liverpool, officials and activists panicked over the possibility that Starmer would perhaps have to vacate his seat. You see, the plummeting ratings just after 3 months in power would leave anyone in panic mode. However, Starmer is not the first politician in history to suffer such a blow. The most glaring example here is perhaps his predecessor, Rishi Sunak, whose favourability fell 11 points only 70 days into the job. Whereas leaders like Boris Johnson, Theresa May, David Cameron enjoyed fairly stable net ratings over the same period. But what is remarkable here in Starmer's case is his disastrous fall after a meteoric rise. According to British newspaper Observer opinion poll, Starmer's personal ratings dropped further during his first Labour conference as Prime Minister. 24% approved of the job he was doing, and a staggering 50% do not believe he's doing his job properly. You see, Keir Starmer already has a series of self-goals to his name, pretty embarrassing ones. The wardrobe gate controversy has led to mounting trouble for him. It's still early days. Even critics say it may be too early to write off Starmer just yet, of course. But how early is too early given UK's ever-changing political landscape? Can he save himself? Or will he be the next fallen star in UK politics? Will the streak of self-goals continue? Only time will tell. A lot has been said in recent months about Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin seeing eye to eye on multiple issues, of a close friendship between the two, claimed by Trump himself, and of Trump having the say to end the war in Ukraine. A new book by American journalist Bob Woodward, like we just mentioned, takes that further, in fact. Here's more.
Veteran journalist Bob Woodward's book titled War, set for release, claims Trump secretly sent medical equipment to Russian President Vladimir Putin for COVID tests. It claims Trump and Putin may have spoken as many as 7 times since 2021. Putin is said to have accepted Trump's offer of sending COVID tests, but he warned Trump not to reveal the details of the supplies that could lead to a potential political backlash adversely impacting the former US president. On its part, the Kremlin accepts medical equipment was sent, though it rejects the idea of frequent discussions between the two. Trump's team terms the Trump-Putin interactions diplomacy.
So have I talked to Donald Trump about his calls with Vladimir Putin? No. I've never had that conversation with Donald Trump in my life. But if Donald Trump, even if it's true, look, is there something wrong with speaking to world leaders? No? Is there anything wrong with engaging in diplomacy?
The Trump-Putin bromance, as it has come to be known, goes back several years now. Trump praised the Russian president as a genius and pretty savvy when Russia invaded Ukraine in early 2022. The former president has often boasted that he would end the war in a day if he entered the White House again. That has sparked fears that Trump would help Russia achieve a favorable peace deal by cutting off aid to Kyiv. His opponents have raised fears of another Trump presidency being in Moscow's favor. The Trump-Zelensky meet in New York last month said much. Trump told Zelensky he would work with both Ukraine and Russia to end their conflict, even as he stressed that he had the equation with Putin to do it.
So we have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
more good relations.
We're going to have, oh, I see. Yeah, but you know, it takes two to tango, you know, and we're going to have a good meeting today.
There's no denying that this Trump-Putin equation has a role to play in the US elections to come. To what degree it works for Trump and how much against him remains to be seen. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Our next story is about China. It seems to be afraid of Baloch separatists in Pakistan. It's because of the spike in attacks against Chinese nationals in Pakistan. And here's why we are saying this. Today, China has warned citizens against traveling to Pakistan, especially in two of its western provinces. Why is that, you ask? Well, because Beijing has been rattled following the deadly suicide bombings that took place in Karachi on Sunday. 2 Chinese citizens, remember, were killed. Several others were injured in a suspected suicide attack near the Karachi airport. Let's give you more details here. The latest attack took place right before the SCO summit meeting in Pakistan. The Balochistan Liberation Army, that has increasingly targeted Chinese nationals in Pakistan, claimed responsibility for the attack in Karachi. According to the Chinese news outlet Global Times, the targeted convoy was transporting Chinese employees of Port Qasim Electric Power Company. Now, China is worried. In a statement released on Monday, in fact, the Chinese embassy advised its citizens to avoid traveling to the southwest province of Balochistan and the northwest province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Now, these are the parts that have seen a surge in attacks against Chinese personnel and projects in recent times. And amid the rise in attacks on Chinese interests in Pakistan, Beijing has called upon Islamabad to, number one, severely punish the attackers. Number 2, to plug security loopholes in order to protect the multi-billion-dollar China-Pakistan economic corridor. Here's what Beijing's official statement, available on the embassy website, reads in English, quoting Chinese citizens, enterprises and projects in Pakistan to be vigilant, pay close attention to the security situation, strengthen security measures and make every effort to take safety precautions, quote unquote. How has Pakistan government responded? Pakistan's finance minister, Mohammad Aurangzeb, has said that the Chinese nationals killed in the Sunday attack were independent power producers and engineers. Aurangzeb also added that the government was in energy debt restructuring negotiations with them. Senior politician Mushashid Hussain Said, who closely monitors China-Pakistan relations, has also expressed regret over the situation on social media. You see, this is not the first time such an attack took place against Chinese nationals. In April 2022, the same group had killed 3 Chinese academics and their local driver in a suicide bombing. There are other instances as well. While in 2021, the suicide bombing at the Dasu hydropower project claimed lives of 9 Chinese engineers and 4 Pakistani soldiers. Following this, early this year, Pakistan had announced plans to strengthen security protocols for Chinese workers and took disciplinary action against senior officials for their negligence. In the year 2020, the Pakistan Stock Exchange, partly owned by Chinese interests, was also targeted by the BLA. In 2016, over 60 Chinese workers were killed or injured in Pakistan. Let's now give you a bit of context here. The BLA, which advocates for the autonomy of the Balochistan region, has opposed Pakistan's control over Balochistan, claiming the region is exploited for resources without benefiting the local Baloch population. An allegation that, by the way, has been denied by the state. And over time, BLA's tactics have strengthened, right from suicide bombings to guerrilla warfare that further intensified the tensions around Chinese projects in the region. And in the wake of all of this, China's top espionage agency, the Ministry of State Security, has pledged to step up early warning and anti-terrorism intelligence cooperation. It said that the MSS firmly opposed all forms of terrorism and was committed to supporting Pakistan's counter-terrorism efforts. But what does this mean for the relations between the two sides? Despite escalating violence, the Pakistani government remains committed to strategic partnership with China. Clearly, Islamabad views Beijing as its crucial economic and geopolitical ally. You see, China has invested more than $65 billion in Pakistan's infrastructure. These include key projects like the Gwadar port, power plants and road networks. These investments have created thousands of jobs and improved trade routes, according to Pakistan's Ministry of Planning. Notably, the CPEC has created over 80,000 local jobs, with energy projects adding 10,000 megawatt of energy to the national grid. Recent meetings among members of the security bloc focused on strengthening regional security measures. Therefore, Pakistan does not want to actually irk China for the sake of national interests and more. And it now remains to be seen, can Islamabad deliver on its promise and actually address security concerns promptly? In a move that raises more questions than gives out answers, Sri Lanka has reportedly allowed a Chinese naval vessel to dock in its waters, despite the ongoing ban on foreign research vessels. And the timing of this is triggering questions. Is this a coincidence or is it a worrying sign for India? Because this comes just days after India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met the new Sri Lankan President, Anura Kumar Dissanayake. This was in Colombo. Let's just break down the developments for you. As per reports, Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister, Vijita Herath, insisted that there has been no shift in the country's policy regarding research vessels. In fact, he claims that the ship in question, the Po Lang, a massive triple-masted ship with a crew of 130, is a training vessel and is not involved in research. Reports say the Chinese crew will stay until Friday, including offering briefings to Sri Lankan sailors and visiting tourist attractions. This docking, however, is raising questions over whether this is a strategic signal. You see, India has long been wary of China's growing footprint in the Indian Ocean, and recent reports, both in Indian and Sri Lankan media, regarding the island nation's relations with Beijing are only fueling this suspicion. Sri Lanka, remember, is located on a vital stretch of the world's shipping routes. Since 2017, Chinese investments have flooded into Sri Lanka, especially in its ports that reportedly serve not only the trade purposes but also potentially military ones. Now, consider this. Back in January, reportedly, after significant pressure from India, Sri Lanka banned Chinese research vessels from docking at its ports. But now, less than a year later, and after a recent presidential change, are we seeing a shift in Colombo's stance is the question. And what is at stake for Sri Lanka here? As per reports, Dissanayake's administration is leaning heavily on China for economic lifeline investments, trade opportunities, tourism, digital infrastructure. It is no secret that Sri Lanka's economy is in dire condition, so is Sri Lanka viewing China as an alluring partner for that reason? Experts say that China's Belt and Road Initiative is not just about pouring money into infrastructure, it is a move for China to extend its geopolitical reach. According to them, in fact, by strengthening ties with nations like Sri Lanka, Beijing gains leverage in the region, and Sri Lanka, in turn, becomes ever more dependent on China. Dissanayake's government reportedly is ready to deepen this partnership, even if it means testing its relationship with India that views Chinese encroachment in the Indian Ocean with increasing alarm. The Indian Ocean is not just another water body, you see. It's a strategic battleground. And any increased Chinese presence there threatens to tilt the balance of power in a region critical to India's national security. The fact that Chinese ships can actually dock in Sri Lankan ports, whether under the guise of research or training, undermines New Delhi's efforts to curb Beijing's influence. Whether it's the Chinese vessel Yuan Wang 5's visit to Hambantota in the year 2022, the Xi'an 6 research vessel docking in Colombo in 2023, and now questions being raised over the Po Lang. And each visit raises fresh concerns about potential spying and monitoring activities. And it's not just India. Reportedly, even the US is concerned. In fact, It voiced its concerns about the Xi'an 6 docking in Sri Lanka last year. So why is Sri Lanka allowing these ships to dock is the question. Is Colombo playing a dangerous balancing act? On one hand, needing India, its closest neighbor and a key trading partner, and on the other, looking for China's investments to keep its economy afloat. While this strategy of courting both powers may be beneficial in the short term, in the long run, it could leave Sri Lanka caught in a tussle with neither India nor China fully trusting its intentions. And like we said earlier, the timing of this latest development raises more questions than answers. It comes just days after India's External Affairs Minister met with the Sri Lankan president in a series of high-level meetings in Colombo. And during those discussions, India, as per reports, extended an invitation to Dissanayake to visit New Delhi. Even as Dissanayake prepares to engage with India, his government appears to be quietly accommodating China's interests. So is Sri Lanka using China as a bargaining chip to extract more favorable terms, or is Colombo simply too dependent on Beijing? Either way, the optics are questionable. Sri Lanka's decision to allow a Chinese vessel to dock in itself triggers questions, like we said, despite the so-called ban on foreign research vessels. What are you planning to eat for your next meal? How about an asteroid with a glass of juice? I know that sounds hilarious, bizarre, and you are possibly wondering why I would even suggest such a thing. Well, as it turns out, asteroids can be transformed into food for astronauts on deep space missions. Let that sink in. As per a new study published in the International Journal of Astrobiology, astronauts could use asteroids to meet their nutritional needs. I know you might still be wondering, why asteroids? They are made of rocks after all. Well, let me break this down for you. Basically, the astronauts will not be consuming rocks directly. Of course, no one can be expected to eat rocks. Let me tell you what this involves. This is basically about extracting the carbon from space rocks and then turning it into something edible that can be consumed. As we know, there is only so much dried food that astronauts can carry. There are limitations, of course, and the idea is to tackle this challenge. The study was led by researchers from Michigan Technological University. Do you know about a US Department of Defense project that turned plastic waste into edible food? Yes, that happened. Basically, the process involves breaking down plastic into solids, gas, and oil, and the oil is then fed to bacteria. This happens with the help of a bioreactor and then results in the production of nutritious biomass. And I'll tell you why this is all the more interesting. As we all know, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore have been stranded in space. In fact, earlier, a cargo spacecraft arrived at the International Space Station to deliver food, fuel, other supplies for those on board. Remember, the ISS currently houses the expedition's 71 crew, and Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, they are stuck on the station due to safety concerns over the Boeing Starliner capsule that was meant to take them home. So that is how food and other items were supplied, in case you were wondering how that really happens. Also, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore have been stranded in space. Remember, they were meant to return in days, but the stay has gotten extended. And how? So obviously that warrants supply of food. Coming back to how asteroids could help meet astronauts' nutritional requirements, it is still a long way off. There is a major hurdle. Extensive toxicity testing is required, basically so that the biomass created for astronauts is safe to eat. But the fact that asteroids can serve as food is a possibility in itself means a lot. North Korea's army has said it will completely cut off roads and railways connected to South Korea, and this decision marks a further escalation in Pyongyang's activity to demarcate its borders, separating the two Koreas. Our next report telling you more.
North Korea's army has said it will completely cut off roads and railways connected to South Korea, starting from Wednesday. That announcement on state broadcaster KCNA likely indicates a further escalation in activity close to the demarcation line separating the two Koreas. In recent years, such activity had been rare. But this year, according to South Korea's military in July, North Korea has spent months installing landmines and barriers and creating wasteland across the heavily militarized border. The General Staff of the Korean People's Army said in a statement on KCNA that it was responding to war exercises that have been held in South Korea. The statement, which called South Korea the primary hostile state and invariable principal enemy, also pointed to frequent visits by US strategic nuclear assets in the region. South Korea's defense ministry said that the United Nations Command had been notified, but declined to give specifics. The UNC is a US-led multinational military force that oversees affairs in the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas, which remain technically at war.
Let's now shift our focus to an astonishing feat, a commendable one by a young Nepalese man who has not only shattered records but also defied expectations. As per reports, Nima Rinji Sherpa, an 18-year-old mountaineer from Nepal, has officially conquered all 14 of the world's 8,000-meter peaks. Yes, you heard that right. This, of course, is an extraordinary feat. It is reportedly considered as the ultimate achievement in the world of mountaineering. But what makes this even more remarkable is his age. He is the youngest ever to do this. And by some distance, as per reports, the record was previously held by another Nepalese climber who achieved it in 2019 at the age of 30. Now, on Wednesday, Nima reportedly reached the top of Tibet's 8,027-meter mountain. This is the world's 14th highest mountain and thereby sealing his place in history. As per reports, he climbed some of the most dangerous and unforgiving mountains on Earth, where oxygen is extremely thin. Now he stands tall, both literally and figuratively, above the rest. But you see, this victory is about more than just numbers or records. Nima reportedly sees this accomplishment as a tribute to the Sherpa community, a group that has been the backbone of Himalayan mountaineering for decades, but has often gone under-recognized for their contributions. He reportedly stated, I'm quoting, "This summit is not just the culmination of my personal journey, but a tribute to every Sherpa who has ever dared to dream beyond the traditional boundaries set for us," quote unquote. A clear testament to the Sherpa community, who are not just people who carry gear or fix ropes for foreign climbers, but they are themselves mountaineering legends and experts. As per reports, Nima comes from a family steeped in mountaineering history. His father, Tashi Sherpa, reportedly said, I'm quoting, "I knew he would do it," quote unquote. Indeed, he did. But let's not forget, Nima did not just wake up one day and decide to climb the world's tallest peaks. He reportedly began his journey at just the age of 16 when he scaled Mount Manaslu in Nepal. And by this June, he had reportedly already conquered 13 of the 8,000-meter peaks. Nima Rinji Sherpa's success reflects that age is just a number and no challenge is too great or tall if you have the drive to achieve your dreams. Onto Antarctica now. It is turning green from white. That's right. Scientists say the world's coldest continent is fast turning green thanks to vegetation growing at an astounding rate. As mosses, lichens, grasses have blossomed across the continent. Not just that, this coincides with a marked decrease in sea ice. Let's break this down for you. A new study published in Nature Geoscience reveals a stark rise in vegetation cover across the Antarctica Peninsula. Over the past 4 decades, almost 12 square kilometers of Antarctica is now covered in green as the temperatures soar, which, by the way, is up from 1 square kilometer back in 1986. And talking about the expansion, it is almost equal to 110 football pitches, now becoming over 1,500. Not just that, the study also shows that Antarctica's ice cover has reached a near record low for the southern hemisphere winter, only second to last year's record-breaking figures. Let that sink in. And what's worse, this is not something new. In fact, in recent years, this trend has only accelerated, with the rate of greening increasing over 30% between 2016 and 2021. Then why is this particular finding significant, you ask? While previous research has only talked about the extent of vegetation at any point, the team led by Tom Rowland of the University of Exeter used more than 3 decades of satellite data to trace the entire process of change in vegetation growth, and they established whether an area was covered with vegetation by looking for evidence of photosynthesis via measuring visible red and near-infrared light ratios. Even as a tiny proportion, that is 0.12% of the continent's ice-free area has now turned green, experts have raised alarm, saying that this was concerning and bears significant impact on the planet's overall ecology. So even though from the looks of it, the landscape may still predominantly be snow, ice and rock, the dramatic increase of plant life is a red flag that can no longer be ignored. And when it comes to vegetation that can survive on ice, mosses champion all by thriving amid the harshest conditions on Earth and are now dominating the Antarctic landscape. Not just mosses, Antarctica is home to liverwort and other small flowering plants, but ecologically speaking, this is not good news. Studies found that the dying of plant matter over time increases soil formation and creates a scope for non-native and invasive species of plants to be introduced on boots worn by tourists or via some researchers' scientific equipment, which might pose serious risks to Antarctica's environmental future, leading to greater homogeneity and a loss in biodiversity as previous isolated ecological areas link up. Overall, the Antarctic Peninsula is warming up faster than the global average, with extreme heat events becoming commonplace. This is enough evidence of the fact that climate change is unsparing. 2024's most anticipated and biggest release, Joker 2, has now been declared a flop. The DC film is continuously tumbling at the box office with a disappointing opening weekend in the United States. Starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga in the lead roles, the movie, which was expected to be among the year's biggest blockbusters, debuted for an estimated $81.1 million. The film, which is a follow-up to the blockbuster Joker, earned a disappointing $40 million domestically. Globally, the offbeat comic book film has earned $121.1 million. The point of concern is that the film, which was made on a massive budget of $200 million, has still not reached the break-even point. And this is something new for a big DC film that was one of the biggest hopes for a rebooted studio. But why did the movie fail? Well, there are multiple reasons. Firstly, the terrible reviews. The movie, which received a 12-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival, failed to impress the critics and the audience. So much so that the movie has become the first Hollywood comic book film to receive a D rating from the audience survey firm CinemaScore. And then comes the superhero fatigue. Recent releases from both Marvel and DC Studios are performing poorly at the box office. In fact, analysts suggest that it is the condition of superhero fatigue kicking in. In the last few years, the only superhero movie that has worked is the 2024 release, Deadpool and Wolverine. And lastly, the reason why Joker 2 is stumbling at the box office is because of its added costs. These are related to the fees for filmmaker Todd Phillips as well as Joaquin Phoenix, who returns as the troubled stand-up Arthur Fleck, and Lady Gaga, who puts her own spin on Harley Quinn. While the film's status as 2024's biggest flop threatens a worst-case future DC, that's the question that's being raised. Will DC revamp itself? Well, we will have to wait and watch. And the festival season has kicked off in India. Hindus are celebrating the festival of Durga Puja, a festival marked by prayers to the goddess Durga. Elaborately decorated images of the goddess are installed in community centers, and people are celebrating with delicious food, music, and dance and cultural performances to mark the victory of good over evil. Take a look.
For this puja, Durga Puja is basically an emotion for the Bengalis.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gampi, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
Mozambique holds a general election on the 9th of October, but voters fear they will be deprived of a fair and democratic electoral process. The Southern African nation and is one of the poorest countries in the world, despite its vast natural gas deposits. Kenya's Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua apologizes to his boss, President William Ruto, and citizens after lawmakers launched an impeachment proceeding.
If you insubordinate the state, you are not worth being a state officer.
And Ethiopia's capital hosted thousands at the Irecha Heritage Festival on one end of Addis Ababa, and on the other, thousands celebrated an annual religious festival marked by the lighting of bonfires, according to the beliefs of the local Orthodox Christian faithful. That's this week on World of Africa, at these times on WION World is One.